We're doing Algebra 2 pre-calc. This is 6.3 in the pre-calc book. This is example 4, doing some operations with vectors. So we have two vectors given in component form, vector u, which is 2 comma 1, and vector v, which is 3 comma negative 8. And we're asked to find four things. So for a, we're asked to find u plus v. So again, when you're doing operations with vectors in component form, it's fairly intuitive. U plus v just means take the horizontal components, the sort of the x coordinate here, and add them, and then take the y components and add them, and that'll be your vertical component. So I'm going to do u plus v, which means it's going to look like a 2 plus a 3 for my horizontal component, and a 1 plus a negative 8 for my vertical component. So u plus v should be a 5 comma negative 7. And that's it, right? Now, in the previous video, we didn't address subtraction, but subtraction is just addition by a negative. So you could either find the opposite of v, right? So the negative of v would, instead of being a 3 comma negative 8, would be a negative 3 comma 8, and then add them. Or you could just simply treat this as subtraction. So you would take the vector u component, which is 2, and subtract the corresponding vector v component, which is 3. And then in the vertical direction, you would take 1 minus a negative 8. So your component form would end up being a negative 1 comma 9. 2u plus 5v, there are a couple ways to do this. You could go ahead and find 2u separately and find 5v separately and then add them. That's fine. Or you could just kind of cram it all into one piece of information, right? So 2 times the u horizontal component plus 5 times the v horizontal component, right, comma, 2 times the u vertical component plus 5 times the v vertical component, right? So, and if I do that, when I clean this stuff up, and we'll inch over a little bit, right, I get a 4 plus a 15 for the horizontal component, and I get a 2 minus a 40 for the vertical component, so that looks like it's going to be a 19 comma negative 38, right, and that's my 2u plus 5v. Again, if you prefer, you could have found 2u separately, right? You could have said, hey, 2u is a 4 and a 2, and you're adding it to 5v, which is a 15 and a negative 40, and then you would have jumped right to here where you have 4 plus 15 and 2 minus the 40, and that's also totally fine. Again, if you wanted to do that separately, you can. It's entirely up to you. U minus 10v, again, if you want, you could just say, hey, that's a 2 comma 1 minus, and then you could find 10v, which would be a 30 comma negative 80, and that's fine, right? And then you could just go ahead and put them together. 2 minus 30, 1 minus a negative 81, and that's fine. But if you want, you can also just do 2 minus the 10 times that 3, right? And 1 minus the 10 times that negative 8, right? And if you do that, you're going to get the same thing you get here, which is 2 minus 30, right? So negative 28 as your horizontal component, and 1 minus a negative 80, which would be 1 plus an 80, so 81, right? Again, if you wanted to write this as 2 minus 30 and 1 plus 80, that's totally fine, right? So that's the general gist of how we do these operations in component form.